Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the OGCA's webinar series. My name is Giovanni Cautillo, and I am the President and CEO of the OGCA. The topic today in our series is racism in construction, and we have an illustrious panel with us. I'm going to introduce the panel alphabetically. We're going to start off with Samuel Ajobo. Samuel is a professional engineer and an estimator with EllisDon, and he serves as a dual role. He's also the chair of the ABEEL, which is the Alliance of Black Employee and Experience Leadership with EllisDon. The second panelist is Jennifer Kahn. She's the head of inclusive diversity at EllisDon and a very opinionated individual. She's fantastic, and you'll find that out throughout the discussion that we're having. And rounding out the panel, we have the president and CEO of EllisDon, Geoff Smith, who really doesn't require an introduction, just because you're kind of a centerpiece for ICI construction. Prior to getting into the discussion piece on racism in the panel, we have a very distinguished and very special guest. We have the Honorable Monty McNaughton with us. As you know, again, someone else who doesn't really need an introduction, the Minister of Labor, Training and Skills Development, has been a staunch supporter of construction and a very vocal advocate on the topic of racism. And we want to start off with the Minister's remarks. So Minister, I'm going to hand over the mic to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Giovanni, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the OGCA for facilitating this conversation today and for inviting me to be a part of this important conversation. I think all of us can agree this obviously isn't an easy subject to talk about, but as leaders, we can't shy away from tough topics. I also want to thank Geoff Smith, my good friend and the president and CEO of EllisDon, and all of his team for sharing the steps that EllisDon has taken and is taking to address racism at your company and in the industry at large. Geoff and a team from EllisDon actually recently shared with the Prevention Council how they are addressing anti-Black racism. The council was very impressed, and so was I, by the initiatives that EllisDon is taking. As the Minister of Labor, Training and Skills Development, my #1 priority obviously is to make sure that people go to work every day at a safe work site and come home safely to their families at the end of the day. But my ministry's mandate isn't limited to keeping workers out of harm's way physically. We also recognize the importance of protecting workers' mental health and well-being. Employers are required to take measures on job sites to prevent harassment, which includes racism. Their obligation to create and maintain a safe working environment is enshrined in law, in the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Employers who don't fulfill this obligation should expect a ministry labor inspector at their door. Most employers, as we know, overwhelmingly take health and safety seriously. We've seen that in the way the construction sector has responded to the pandemic, working with my ministry to stay open safely. And we've seen it in the response to recent racist incidents, a response which includes meetings like this one. So how to improve work sites and make them safer for everyone? By creating and enforcing anti-racism policies, by educating workers and supervisors on their rights and obligations under the law, by having programs in place to prevent workplace violence and workplace harassment, by educating workers about these programs, and by reviewing day-to-day operations to remove any discriminatory practices. It is in everyone's best interests, owners, managers, workers, to create a safe working environment free from harassment and discrimination. But more importantly, it's just the right thing to do. We live in an amazingly rich, diverse province where more than 29% of our population are visible minorities. It is our moral and legal obligation to ensure that people from racialized communities feel safe working in construction. We need them in this section. We need them in this sector. We want them, and it's just imperative for the future. Just last week, the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association reported that 60% of their survey respondents said they have immediate skills in labor shortages. And businesses were among those having the hardest time finding workers right here in Ontario. The bottom line is a welcoming and inclusive workplace is good for business. It's essential to the mental and emotional well-being of workers, and it's a moral imperative. So here are some of the things we're doing to bring more diversity into the construction sector and skilled trades in general, and to address the skills shortage at the same time. This fall, I appointed 3 youth advisors to help better promote the skilled trades as a career choice. These advisors are identifying barriers that prevent underrepresented groups like visible and non-visible minorities, Indigenous people, and youth from racialized communities from considering jobs in the trades. And the marketing campaign my ministry ran online and in movie theaters last year and early this year, highlighting the benefits of a career in the skilled trades, it purposely depicted real-life skilled trades workers from a variety of backgrounds and races in order to show that this industry is inclusive and open to everyone. Racism, including anti-Black racism, has no place in our workplaces or in our society. It will take real hard work on the part of our employers, labor unions, government, and workers to eradicate it. But knowing that there are so many on this call today, I think Giovanni said more than 350 people eager to hear from Geoff Smith and his team and the panel. I know that we're going to move forward together and make everyone safer and more inclusive in the construction sector. So thanks again for having me here, and thank you for all of your work on this issue.
Mr. McNaughton, thank you very much for your commentary as well as your support of the construction industry. Knowing that we have someone like you at the ready is very helpful and puts our mind at ease. And together, I think we can definitely solve this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, so we're going to turn to the panel at hand. I think what I want to do to start off the conversation is Geoff, you're a rather polarizing individual, and you know that. When it comes right down to it, like myself, people either gravitate towards you or away from you, depending upon what your opinion is. But you are an opinion leader. Let's be honest with that. And because of that, I think I want to hear from you simply because you've demonstrated such leadership on this topic. And I really want to highlight that simply because this is not, as the minister mentioned, a topic that most people even want to talk about. Instead, you tackled it head on. You demonstrated that it was something that it was not only important to EllisDon, but important to the industry to deal with. And I think I want to hear from you in regards to what EllisDon's approach has been to addressing racism.
Well, thanks very much, Giovanni, and I hope I'm not too polarizing, but we'll see how the conversation goes today. What you just asked me to address is a very broad subject, and of course Samuel and Jen can speak more effectively about the extent and impact of racism on the industry and the details of what EllisDon is doing about it. So if it's okay, I'll start sort of at a bit of a high level, and then you can pick up anything I miss. We can ask questions and get into an effective conversation here. Let me start by saying, listen, when we had a couple of nooses appear on Michael Garron Hospital, everybody knows, in June, and I was frankly astunned that this could occur in the industry. I had never heard of such a thing, and the reason it's important to say that is because I was very quickly disabused. I was very quickly educated by a few people, including Samuel, including Jen, including by the conversations I had with one of the 2 victims on site, who made it very clear to me that, no, we have a real problem in this industry with both overt racism, and by that I mean the nooses and the graffiti that you may have seen, but we also, and maybe not, one's not more important than the other, we also have a very big problem with systemic racism in this industry. And that does not mean the industry, everybody in the industry, including people like me, are racist on purpose, but it maybe means we're complacent. It maybe means we're satisfied with the status quo, when the status quo is that people of color, and I'm going to say most specifically Black people, do not get the access to opportunities. They are not made to feel comfortable and safe, as the minister said, on our job sites. And they do not get, I don't think, the same opportunities for promotions and equal pay, just kind of because it's the way it is. I got to tell you, one of the victims on the site at Michael Garron said to me, and Samuel's been very generous to me, the victim, I won't name him, he and I have become friends. He said, he's very generous. He said, Mr. Smith, I don't blame you. You don't hang around with people like me. You don't see the racism. So it's okay that you didn't know about it. I'll give you that. And then he said to me, but now you know. Now, because he was the one with his workmate who said, no, we're going to take a stand here. And he said, but now you know. And now what are you going to do? And so I don't want to go on and on, but I'll say a couple of things and then I'll turn it back to you, Giovanni, and you can lead the conversation. The first thing we did that I think is really important is we said, we're going to embrace this publicly. We're not going to, and believe me, there have been other nooses on other companies' job sites. Some of them embrace them. I salute Daniels and a couple of others. You know, we will acknowledge that there's a problem here. Some of the other companies have said, no, cut that noose down, put it over there. We don't need ourselves in the media like EllisDon. Look at the kicking that EllisDon is taking. We're not going to do that. Their brand is taking a hit. We said, no way, man. We are going to say there's a problem here. There's a problem in the industry. There's a systemic problem at EllisDon and in the industry, and we're going to face it. So I would just encourage everybody in the industry that acknowledging racism doesn't mean you're a racist. It means you're acknowledging that there's a problem. And then we started on the steps that we're going to take. And I'm going to leave Jennifer and Samuel to explain that. But I'm just going to say, if you step forward, you take flack. Sometimes you become the poster boy or girl, man or woman. Sometimes you become polarizing. I don't care. We had to do that. I've learned so much over the course of the summer about the extent of this problem and what we've got to do about it. And that's kind of where the last thing I'll say, and I think, Giovanni, you just mentioned this, is we were really relieved to see that there was an arrest made on over the weekend, and it was announced on Monday. I think it's important to solve the crime, right? It's important to bring the person to justice. He's got to stand trial. We'll see what happens. But it's important to show the industry, society, the community, the black members of the industry that we take it seriously, that the police take it seriously. And then it's also important because the workers on that site now know, hopefully, that the perpetrator is not there, has been identified, and that site specifically is safer. So I was really happy to see that happen. It took a lot of work. I salute the Toronto Police Service for that. But again, that's just one step. We've got a long, long road ahead of us to fix this industry, and we got to work at it. I'll turn it back to you.
What I do want to, again, highlight for everyone is that regardless of the size of the company, be it small, medium, or large, it's pursuant to the direction of the leadership. You touched upon it, Geoff, when you said you decided that, you know what, this is a big enough topic that we needed to embrace, and you did so where others did not. And for that, I applaud EllisDon in being a leader for this, because you did take flack. And again, I talked about you being polarizing because of the fact that, you know, you chose to do that. But it was the right thing to do. And then not only that, you empower people. You've got Samuel and Jennifer here to be your conduit to help you and to guide you. You put the right people in place. So overall, it's a compliment to the leadership and to yourself and to your entire team and how you dealt with this problem. So from the OGCA standpoint in our industry, thank you for actually taking the lead in this, because we know it has not been easy.
Can I add two quick things?
Sure.
One is, and this is for the people listening, if you don't take a leadership role and acknowledge the systemic and overt racism in our industry, your black employees and BIPOC employees, people of color, they see that and they know the industry, they know the racism and the intolerance is there. And when they see you not embracing the problem, meaning acknowledging the problem, that makes the problem worse. At EllisDon, we didn't embrace the problem. Frankly, I didn't embrace the problem because I was really excited about doing it. But I knew that if we didn't, our employees, all of them, including the white employees, would go, well, that's a complete failure right there. And the industry needs to do that. I would encourage everybody, please just acknowledge the problem, because your employees will say, okay, now there's a leader in my company. Then now I have a company full of leaders because we get it. I don't see that happening enough, frankly. I'll just say lastly, I have to say the unions have been very good. Once they knew there was a problem, the union leadership has said, we got a problem, let's fix it. They've been very supportive of all these steps.
And I guess when it comes down to it, it wasn't a matter of you being excited about the problem. It was a matter of about, you know what, taking the steps. And for those attending the webinar today, we'll talk a little bit more about it during the course of the conversation here, but EllisDon does have some tools to assist others that they're willing to share with everyone, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But Geoff, thank you for your commentary, and don't worry, folks. Geoff will be sprinkling his opinion throughout the course of the webinar, like it or not, as I've been warned. But I do want to turn my attention right now to Samuel. And Samuel, I have a specific question to ask you, obviously, about racism on not only this site, but let's look at it. Has the industry really been complacent in their position? And I'd like to hear from you specifically, and I'm going to single you out on this one. So please, have we been complacent as an industry?
Giovanni, thank you for the opportunity to speak today to everybody. To answer your question, you know, it depends on what lens you're looking at it from. From the lens of a Black person like myself in construction, yes, we have been complicit as an industry. And yeah, yes, we have been complicit.
So just out of curiosity, the incidence of racism on the site, has it changed the way you think about racism in society as a whole, or is it still specific to the construction industry, Samuel?
So what I'm going to say on that, Giovanni, again, is, as I said, we're complicit in the industry, but it's important to note that the incidents, though, they haven't changed what I think about racism, specifically anti-Black racism in our society. And I think I would give you, let's say, about 3 reasons for that. 1, nooses on construction sites isn't a new thing, and neither is the use of derogatory remarks such as the N-word and graffitis within and outside the construction industry a new thing. The same foundational problems that breeds hate, and I believe Geoff touched on some of those things already, you know, they stay true within and outside the construction industry. One of those problems is consciously and subconsciously systematically creating barriers for BIPOC, women, and many other more underrepresented groups. So for example, barriers for people of my skin color, for instance, is that there is not equitable representation. There are not people like our skin color sitting on the policy-making tables or take on leadership roles or own businesses. Number 3, the industry has little to no equitable representation of BIPOC communities in leadership positions that influence change. You know, so this foundational problem is similar to what is happening in key institutions of our society. I don't need to mention that. But what I want to say, though, is that when I hear people like Geoff yesterday saying, quote unquote, our work is not over, it has just begun, I say kudos. We are not just staying in mood of celebrating, you know, even though it deserves it. You know, acts of someone like Geoff and similar leaders spurs hope that we are not willing to remain complicit, and change is on the way to build the trust we need for a progressive future. I mean, that's my take on that.
You know, and I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your candor as well. I want to switch over to Jen for just a second. On the heels of you know, finding the nooses and whatnot, tell us a little bit about what happened on the Michael Garron Hospital site, just to fill in the gaps for anyone who has been living under a rock for the last, you know, couple of months and hasn't heard about this at all.
Yeah, thank you, Giovanni, and thank you for having us on the panel today. And I just wanted to echo Samuel and Geoff's comments that our work is not done. In fact, we're really just beginning. And I think we talked about this earlier. We're doing this work not because we just wanted to catch one individual. Obviously, identifying that is a big win that should be celebrated. But what Geoff talked about is the very much alive and well idea of systemic racism. And that's really what we're trying to address. Although a person has been identified, it doesn't stop there. So in terms of what happened to Michael Garron, and obviously there is now a good news story to end this, but I do think that it's very important for us to share it because one, we don't want to throw it under the rug, but also because it's a very good learning lesson for how we dealt with it and how others might want to deal with it if something, and hopefully it never does, but if something like that happens again. So I guess I'll start by saying that on June 10th, 2 nooses were discovered at the Michael Garron site. And it's suspected that the nooses were placed the night before, and they were strategically placed in the work areas where there were Black workers working the previous day. So it was very much our targeted event in the sense that it was placed there specifically. The thought is that they would find them. And as Geoff mentioned, that morning when they were found, there were a ton of emotions that were running through, I think, everyone's veins at that point. And I think that's a very important piece to our response next, because our response on that day, I would say, I could group into 2 different pieces. The first response is a very clear communication about what happened. And then the second response was how we needed to support the people on that site. And when the minister talked about safe work environments, you mentioned that it's not just physical safety, but also the emotional safety and well-being of those on that site. And on that day, that became a very clear indication of what we needed to do. So if I first start with communication, the communication on that day happened pretty much immediately. The senior leaders at EllisDon and the project team had a quick meeting to debrief what happened. There was no hiding of it. Everyone was aware of what happened and what we were going to do to deal with it next. In that meeting, it was decided that we would contact the Toronto police, and that was simply the right thing to do. But again, as a company, and in my experience, never having dealt with the situation, that wasn't a decision that was taken lightly. We had to think about that, and obviously it wasn't a hard decision, but one that was a first for us. And so we had to take that courageous step to actually to make that call. The second piece in terms of the communication is that within hours, we had a site stand down. So with the help of some of the leaders at the EllisDon office, but more importantly, the site leadership, the PMs, the supers, the health and safety reps, and everybody else on that team, they gathered everybody on that site to have a safety stand down to educate and make everybody aware of what happened, what was found, where it was found, and what are the steps that we're going to take, as well as a very strong condemnation of, obviously, the act itself. And then, obviously, then the call to the Toronto police. But even after that, in terms of how we communicated that out, there were further conversations that day with the team on the site, as well as the rest of the workers on the site as well. And that leads me to my second point of mental health. The effects of the noose being found at Michael Garron Hospital had a very traumatic effect for many people on the site, not just for the ones who found the noose, but especially for the ones who found the nooses. So the other part of our response on that day was to provide mental health support. So what we did was that we did provide access to our employee assistance program to assist people in dealing with the emotions that may have been occurring or triggered based on the events. And if you recall, at that time in June, it was a very, very difficult time for many people, specifically Black people, following the death and murder of George Floyd. So that assistance was something that we felt like needed to happen. And then additionally to that, those who were directly affected by the acts, we also offered work with an outside agency for one-on-one coaching as well to help them work through some of their feelings and situations about it. So the response at the Michael Garron site that day was very strong and it was very decisive. And I think although we all would have loved to have never had to deal with the situation, I think what really showed EllisDon's commitment and leadership was how we dealt with it, how open, decisive, and quickly we dealt with the situation.
And just so you understand, the traumatic effect wasn't isolated to EllisDon. The industry as a whole had a ripple throughout it, and
Sure.
and we were all shocked because, again, let's be honest. We look at the States and the issues that we're having there. Oh, that would never happen here. And then all of a sudden it was in your own backyard. It was not only in our own backyard, in our industry, with our peers, our friends. And it was shocking. But I will say, Jennifer, you've touched upon a point. You mentioned leadership no less than about 6 times during the points that you were raising. And I go back to the fact that if not for the leadership of EllisDon and the courage that you guys showed, you could not have had this. This would not have been a positive outcome. But again, I compliment you all on that. Jennifer, I'm going to keep you on the hook here for a second. And in the weeks after the events, and what are the short-term actions EllisDon has done, obviously, other than the discussions and the communication and whatnot, to stop these incidences from happening again? Because I understand that this is something that has reared its ugly head through graffiti and whatnot, as you have mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll mention leadership one last time in this particular context, because I think the weeks and the months after really demonstrated leadership, not just at our senior levels, but also within all levels at EllisDon. And our idea of leadership, or our philosophy on leadership, is that you are a leader regardless of your position or title. And that is something that has had to really come through in all of the efforts that we're taking around anti-racism, anti-Black racism, and intolerance in general. So over the following weeks and months, the conversations that we were having, the actions that we took in place, was very much a direct response to what we were hearing from our employees. And very quickly, in fact, after the murder of George Floyd, that idea that racism lives over there was dissipated. And even before the nooses were found at Michael Garron, we had a very frank discussion with our employees, with some really, really brave and courageous employees who shared their stories, who completely eliminated the idea that racism isn't something that we deal with in our Canadian population. So what we needed to do in the weeks and now continuing in our work is looking at what are the ways in which we can provide processes, that's probably a bad word, but ways that we can provide access and opportunities for people to deal with the effects of systemic racism. So some of the things that we put in place was an anonymous reporting line. So we now have an anonymous email and telephone number that anybody can contact on our sites and in our employees if they experience any form of racism or discrimination. And that's a way for people to feel safe to report, because we do need that. We do need to know when things happen so that we can address them. The other things that we've done is opened up the worker trade committees on our sites, as well as utilizing the joint health and safety committees to offer another platform at the site level to bring forward any concerns around discrimination and racism. We've enhanced a lot of our security features on our sites as a way to deter and make sure that our sites are secure and safe to work, including the addition of security guards, cameras, shoring up our hoardings, and controlling or monitoring access to our sites so we know who is there on a specific day. And then lastly, and the minister also spoke about it, is around education. So as you mentioned, in terms of the ripple effect that these events have happened, we realized very quickly that what we do at EllisDon can't just stay at EllisDon. That in order for us to have the impact that we're looking for, we need to extend our resources and our efforts to pretty much anybody who'll listen and who wants to get involved. And so through things like toolbox talks, webinars, education sessions, that's what we're doing now to try to really enhance and raise the bar on the awareness of racism in Canada, in construction, but more specifically what people can do to be anti-racist and be effective allies.
Fantastic.
Can I just butt in really quickly around the leadership issue, if it's okay? The one thing that's different, and I'm going to say I'm proud of this, at EllisDon, and what I've heard from other parts of the industry, but for the people that are listening, is we pretty quickly realized, for the reasons I said earlier, this effort at EllisDon cannot be led by the old white guy, frankly, in the corner office. He's the guy, you're looking at him, who needs to be educated, who needs to think more deeply, and who needs to take direction, not give it. So so at EllisDon, you're looking at the leaders here, Jennifer and Samuel. You're not looking at Geoff as the leader. It's very important for me, I get it, as the CEO, to provide support, to provide resources, to make sure that there's a complete insistence on where we're going and how we're dealing with it. But the leadership here is coming from, not from the CEO's office, but from the company more broadly, and from the two people you have on your screen here. I see some other companies saying, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. You're the white male, dude. You don't know what needs doing. Because I sure didn't know and don't know today. I think it's really important that it's employee-led as opposed to CEO-led.
And again, I think that speaks to your leadership, Geoff, the fact that, you recognize your shortcomings and you can't be the person who's talking about it because you haven't experienced it. And so because of that, you put the right people in place. Speaking of the right people, I'm going to turn my attention to Samuel for a second on the leadership aspect of things, both for small, medium, and large companies. Do you think that general contractors have a role to play in ensuring sites are free from discrimination and racism?
Hi, Giovanni. Just before I really dive into that question very well, I want to also touch on the leadership thing that Geoff and Jen just spoke about, and is, we created a platform. It was key for us in EllisDon, starting from the leaders like Geoff, to say, we need to bring everybody together to speak about this issue, have tough conversations around this. Let's listen. As Jen will tell you, we created avenues through our health and safety programs, through other mediums within the company. And for instance, they set up the Alliance of Black Employee Experience and Leadership, where, with the help of our leaders like Geoff, Jen, and Kieran, and all of these people, we're able to, have our Say No to Anti-Black Racism Week, where we had posters across all our sites in EllisDon for people within as direct employees of EllisDon, and also our tradespeople, to have access to be able to share, hey, how can I make my site, my place of work, inclusive of Black people, and how can I make it inclusive of everybody? We're able to get first-hand information, for which we had almost close to 2,000 people that participated in that survey. So creating that platform is also essential for people to be able to communicate safely, to share the things that they will normally not share on a day-to-day basis. So now let me jump on your question about, who is responsible here. I will tell you this much, which is everybody is responsible. To be short and sweet, the GC, as general contractors, we are responsible for this work. And everybody is. Everyone has a role to play. The educational system, to educate the future workforce around expectation, what are your rights, what to expect, what to not tolerate. Within the industry, we have the unions, the general contractors ourselves, the subcontractors, clients, and owners. You got to set clear expectations. You have to ensure you communicate zero tolerance. Support healthy and safe work environments, just like the minister touched on a few minutes ago. The governing bodies and construction associations, you need to start thinking about setting standards and providing resources. There needs to be an investment to all of these different levels I just spoke about. So every one of us, including the GC, has a role to play, and it doesn't just start and it doesn't just stop with the GC.
And I do see the fact that, we now have an arrest over here, but it's a symptom, not necessarily the cause, right? So we're going to look at this holistically. I'm going to bounce back to Jennifer just for a second in regards to the long-term methods that EllisDon, we're looking at getting rid of the cause long-term. What have you guys employed to curtail and finally eliminate racist acts? I know it's not as easy as that. I'm compartmentalizing it in a question, but if you can give us a snippet of information, just so that the audience understands that you're not without direction.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I would love to say that we have a game plan that is going to eliminate racism within my career lifespan, and I just don't know if that's going to be the case. I think this is a long time coming. I was on another panel a little while ago, and somebody had mentioned that there is a thought that now the next generation is really going to have to take a hold of this and solve the idea of racism in construction. And I had a very visceral reaction to it. I think Giovanni mentioned that I had a very opinionated reaction to it. And it's simply the fact that social injustice has been going on for centuries. And although we may be at a point where people are now more aware of it, they're willing to do something for it and to make it better, it's not going to be a short-term event here, that there are long-term systemic things that have to happen. And the minister in his opening remarks touched on a lot of them. And, you know, and I think that's a really great way to summarize what we're doing long-term at EllisDon. And there's really three main pieces of this. One is education and awareness. And so we talked a little bit about that from the idea of the education reform and some of the work that ABEEL is doing with our with our school boards across Canada to really empower the future generation so that they know that they deserve equal access. They deserve equitable opportunities. And that's some of the work that the ABEEL group has really been focused on, empowering that future generation. And there are other organizations that we partner with that do similar activities as that to make sure that our future workforce and our future pipeline know what to expect and what should not be tolerated and what they should come to be welcomed in the industry. So whether it's toolbox talks, actual training on microaggressions, subconscious bias or unconscious bias, systemic racism, allyship, those are all things that we're looking at creating within EllisDon and then likely sharing it across the board. So one of the ways that we started this is to create a program on inclusive diversity. And that was the first thing that we started with, is a program that looked at how do you create an inclusive environment? What are the different perspectives that come into play? What are some of the nuances of language and how that affects other people? And that's something that we created and is now mandatory for all employees. And we are open to share that to anybody who would like to see that as well. And the thing that I'll say from that is that although we really wanted to start with, you know, here's what unconscious bias looks like, here's what you do, what we realized is that we needed to first give people the tools to have tough conversations on issues like race and gender and social injustice. Because as an industry and as people, it's a very tough topic. And to use your words, Giovanni, it is polarizing. Racism is polarizing. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to fix or trying to minimize, is to remove the polar kind of effects of racism and focus on what it is that unify us and focus on what are the things that make us better when we work together in the ways that we do. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet, and we talked about a little bit from Samuel's perspective, is that we have created 3 employee leadership groups who are specifically focused on addressing issues of, in Samuel's case, the Alliance of ABEEL. And also we have Jane Chapman from our EDFS group, and she is leading the group on anti-racism and intolerance. So she's looking at not just from a race perspective, but also intolerance for those that are also underrepresented or marginalized in our industry, and how we can then give them a voice and give them a platform to feel that they belong and that they do have that opportunity as well. And then thirdly, we have Christine Cito, who is a director of our M&E construction and pre-construction in our British Columbia area. And she is leading a group called Together. And Together is a really great acronym, and they are focusing on gender equality and making sure that everybody of all gender expressions, again, feel like they belong and they have access to equitable opportunities. So between those 3 groups, of course, and the work that we're doing all together, the 4 of us and our subsequent teams work hand in hand monthly. We probably talk more than they might like, but we are completely joint at the hip to make sure that the work that we're doing is one, celebrating diversity and inclusion, but also making steps towards meaningful action. And that's the last piece that I'll mention in terms of what we're doing. We recently launched a program that we are inviting our employees to provide information around their identity. And although it can be a very sensitive topic, and we've taken many measures to make sure that it's secure and confidential, that is the type of information that we need to know. One, what is the demographic makeup of our employee base? But more important than that, how are we seeing equity and how are we seeing career advancement and mentorship and development going throughout the different layers at EllisDon? So that is a way for us to make sure that we're not just checking off the boxes to say, yeah, we've delivered that training. Yes, we've done that. And then, we're done. What we're really trying to do is root out, like the minister said, looking at our day-to-day operations, how do we remove any evidence or any inkling of discrimination and bias throughout our employee experience. And to me, that's what's really going to make the difference between the lip service that others might be taking when they talk about racism and doing the really meaningful and hard work involved.
So
Giovanni, can I
go ahead,
just,
Geoff.
and I want to get to systemic racism if we can, because it's really important, because that's what breeds everything else. Just a couple of things, Jen, maybe we put in our subcontracts now with everybody, with all of our subs, this will not be tolerated. We've got words, and really that's an education thing, because we know that 99.9% of them, but we'll put it right in there. We're working, and I think, frankly, Jen, it's sitting on my desk, the industry pledge, to get our subcontractors and leaders to sign it, to say we will not, and it's very specific about what we can do. We're working, and this is for your members, for the people listening, about the key is, for me anyway, I think for all of us, immediate response. So first of all, your workers on the sites, your salaried and the hourly workers, have to feel comfortable reporting racist acts, because frankly, they haven't. And a lot of them don't go reported, because people think they'll be persecuted for reporting them, or they just don't think anything will be done, so why would I bother? They've got to feel comfortable reporting them, so that's a messaging thing around toolbox talks, but then they've got to see immediate response. Call the CEO of the subcontractor or whatever, I guarantee you they will respond. And by respond, I mean get that person out of there. And the unions will also respond immediately. Samuel can tell you, and I can tell you, that there's at least a couple of people that we became aware of who were racist on our sites, and we said, hey, we're not going to go to the cops. We don't have time. Just, you're off EllisDon sites forever. They weren't our employees. They were subcontractor tradespeople employees. You're off our sites forever. But then you go to the unions and say, you got to get them out of the industry. And they will work with you. They're not going to, just do it because you said so. So there are very immediate things. But the key is, when you see it, you respond, you follow through, and you take real action to the best of your ability. Because then, all your employees, white, black, and others, will see that you're doing it and they'll feel better. And B, the acts will stop. This guy being charged, I guarantee you, some other idiot thinking of hanging a noose will go, well, I'm still a racist, but I'm not hanging a noose because I might end up in jail. So those immediate responses are key. I don't know, Samuel, does that make sense to you?
No, I was going to jump in there to say, no, Geoff, you touched on it, frankly, there, candidly, and Jen, you touched on some of those things candidly also. And I think, as Geoff is saying, I think he's touching on something very key here, is we need to deal with the systemic issues so that we don't breed products of racism and acts of racism that we now have to deal with short-term measures with. So what I'm saying now is, there might be systemic issues that allows people that hang nooses, use derogatory remarks, put up graffiti to feel comfortable. You got to deal with those systemic issues to ensure that doesn't take place in our sites. And that is what we're doing as well. And some of those things that Jen is talking about, what ABEEL is doing, what we're doing with gender equality, what we're doing with anti-racism and intolerance in general. These are things we are putting in place. I will hold off right now, but I will hope to get to a point where I can talk about the fact of we can't be comfortable hoping that this will take forever, because I have a daughter, a 4-year-old daughter, and I can tell you for sure, I want to look to her face and say, I am conscious and intentional about what I'm doing. And I believe I will lay a foundation with these leaders and other leaders that will join this mission to lay a future that is good for you, a future that will be comfortable and honest and true. It won't be perfect. However, it will be at a good position for you to thrive and not have to worry about the color of your skin or who your dad looks like. So I will hope we'll get to that point, but that is something I just want to throw in there.
No, and it's very poignant. There's a proverb that says that if you tell me, I'll forget. If you show me, I'll remember. But if you involve me, I'll understand. And I think what you're doing through your education and your communication and how you're integrating it all, you're reaching or you're striving for that position of understanding. It's no longer a taboo topic. We are literally talking about it in the hopes to eliminate it moving forward. Again, Geoff mentioned, you don't know what you don't know as the CEO in the office, and when you became aware of it, you can't unknow it now. You need to deal with it. And now Geoff is starting to understand, because he had said himself at the onset that he's getting an education on this topic as things go on. And he surrounded himself with people who can inform him to the best of their knowledge to assist in that direction. And so, again, I compliment you for that. Samuel, going back again, I want to kind of steer it back to the employers once again. And I know that as soon as we had the incident of the nooses, there was a powerful statement put out by EllisDon, condemning the act and those responsible for it. And luckily, we're now in a position to say that there's been an arrest made, which is fantastic. But I need you to kind of educate the people who are involved on this webinar today as employers. What can they do better to be prepared for racism and hate crimes on our sites?
That was a loaded question.
Yeah, well, do you think this was going to be easy?
And I'll do my best here. And I believe, there are a couple of things. For me, I call them the Super 8 sometimes. Ever since we had all these incidents on our sites and all of these things, I've been thinking, what can we do to ensure that this doesn't happen anymore? Or at least the gravity or scale of it comes down considerably, that we are all aware about how much change we've made. So for me, I would say this: be proactive. Never be caught on the defensive end as an employer. Okay. Ensure your sites and offices are made uncomfortable for these perpetrators. This can be done, and I will give you, as I said, the Super 8, some tools here that I believe you can use to achieve this, or at least get going. And I believe you've heard some of this from Jen already and Geoff, of some of the things that EllisDon are already doing about this. Number one, I would tell you, is this: equity. Be intentional about equitable representation of all racial groups as an employer. Who are in leadership positions in your companies? Leaders in this battle of equality and equity, such as people like MLK, Martin Luther King, and famous orator like Michael Dyson, in my opinion, will tell you that, civil rights discussion, voting rights discussion, sympathy towards George Floyd's death, sympathy towards the workers that experience the pain of seeing a noose, a death threat on their side, really cost you nothing in the grand scheme of things. Economic parity does. This requires a shakeup and restructuring of the skeleton, in my opinion, on which the flesh of a company is built on. So, another critical piece of equity also is being intentional about building a pipeline of future talents. And I believe Jen touched on that a little bit. We're talking about coaching, focused mentorship, and many more. This is something I can touch on later on how EllisDon via ABEEL's annual Shaping the Future sponsorship program is currently gaining full steam across 3 provinces in Canada in regards to building a pipeline already. Number 2, build and maintain allyship with the communities you serve. Build and maintain. In construction, we build communities. These communities will be affected by such acts of hate. Therefore, growing and nurturing community allies, you cannot overstate it. Number 3, build and maintain allyship with other like-minded employers to build synergy. We need to work together, and we need to hold everyone and their actions accountable. Every GCs, tradespeople, businesses that support inclusive diversity, we need to empower them. Keep that as your company culture, even when there is no issue. Keep that as your company culture to work together with other people that are like-minded in this fact. Number 4, maintain ongoing training on inclusive diversity with a big emphasis, in my opinion, on validating the content on a routine basis. This is something that really sowed the seed of trust with me and EllisDon. I will tell you from my own experience, because 1 year ago, before the incident of George Floyd, Jennifer, with her team and the leaders in EllisDon, already had a module on inclusive diversity where they brought employees and people within the company to talk about this, even before the incident. You know, EllisDon maintains mandatory anti-racism training modules developed by Jennifer and other members of her team, and that is something that we need to keep doing. Number 5, treat racism and hate crimes with the same urgency as physical occupational health and safety issues. And I believe Geoff had talked about how we did that, and I believe you can hear from the Ministry of Labor personnel there that this is something that is important. The mental health of people, the emotional and the physical, emotional and mental stability of people is also paramount as their physical health. So number 6, in my opinion, is invest capital into creating and maintaining strategic partnerships, formation of affinity groups like ABEEL together that Jen spoke about, team building events that amplify inclusivity. Invest the capital. Number 7, start and keep having tough conversations within your company about racism at every level. Use this medium to educate each other, inform each other, promote awareness, and develop measurable metrics. I'm going to say this. God bless people like Geoff, Jennifer, Kieran Awe. I know you've heard me talk about Kieran a couple of times. Kieran is the sponsor for ABEEL, executive sponsor for ABEEL, and is also the CEO of EllisDon. You know, and many others like them who are saying, I am ready to sit down to have these tough conversations and lay my cards of thoughts on the table. These conversations won't be easy. They won't be friendly to both sides. We just have to have it. You know, we can't run away from it. And the last but not the least, and I think that Jennifer has touched on it, is security. Site security must be effective and up to par at all times. So when you look at some of these things I've listed, you know, one of the key things is this: you cannot wait to build, you cannot wait to operate, and you cannot wait to keep maintaining. Those 3 things work hand in hand to ensure that you are building a foundation on which acts like that will not thrive. That is my opinion of that. I hope that helps.
That very much helps. And from what, I guess, a quick synopsis of what you just said, it's about being proactive. Don't be reactive to the situation. Set yourself up. Prepare yourself in advance of a situation. Make the alliances, the links, the equity. I do like the fact that, you know what, you equated racism to physical health and safety. And it should be, because our industry is all about health and safety. This is just one aspect of it that needs to really be zoned in on and to be elaborated and have the tough conversations. I will tell you, I guess, to those who are viewing, I have a question for both Jennifer and Samuel, and I'm going to hit a nerve here, but it's about microaggressions. And microaggressions, they're not these big overt displays like a noose being found on the site, but they're just little subtleties that may not be noticed by people based on your perception of things, based on your upbringing, based on the fact that, you know what, you haven't been exposed to this kind of stuff. And I'm going to put it out to you both, because I would love to hear from you on microaggressions and how it to stop it at that point helps in the long run. Jennifer, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think 2020 has really challenged many people, and part of it is also these words that are popping up that maybe people weren't familiar with before. And now we call them microaggressions. Before, I used to just call them like little paper cuts that you would experience throughout your day that, as I said, wasn't enough to stop you, but enough to make you pause and say, ow, that one kind of hurt, but I'm going to keep going anyway. And those little microaggressions or those little paper cuts are cues for your employees, for the industry, and those who are looking at this industry as evidence to suggest do I belong here? Am I going to be welcomed here? And microaggressions, quite honestly, sometimes are very subtle. They're very unconsciously given out, and it's not, and you know, quite honestly, I'm sure I have microaggressions as well, but it is something that does happen. And for me, as a Asian woman, a person of color in this industry, sometimes it's as simple as people expecting that I'm the accountant on the site because I'm supposed to be good at math, and anybody who knows me knows that that's not the case. Or it is, you know, when I walk into a meeting and it's typically male dominated, that all the males are shaking each other's hands, but when they come to me, they're not sure if they should shake my hand. So there's a little bit of a pause to say, do I extend or don't I extend? So some of the things that I've done is just recognize what are some of the things that people do unconsciously, and now I don't wait for them to shake my hand. I just extend my hand out and say, yeah, you can shake my hand too. And it's things like that, little paper cuts that happen throughout the day that signal whether or not I'm going to be valued, whether or not I'm going to feel like I belonged. And those are just a couple of examples from my own personal experience. But they do happen, and they do happen to people in different ways, of different ethnicities and backgrounds and gender and what have you. But they can be just as harmful as overt acts over time.
Yeah, I can understand that. And when you bring it to someone's attention, it's something that's probably done subconsciously without even thinking. And I can't understand why they would, but I can understand it's death by a thousand cuts. And that would be painful to anybody. Again, I can ask the same question of Samuel on this one, but I think I'm going to get a more elaborate response and probably 20 minutes worth of commentary. But please, Samuel, in a couple of minutes, and understand everyone and those who are viewing, I'm very cognizant of time, but this is a discussion that we have to have. And if everyone's okay with going a couple of minutes over, I do have a couple of questions that have come in that I would like to address as well. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
All right, so Samuel, same question that I touched upon with Jen about the microaggressions, and what's your take on it?
I think Jen touched on it. It's those little things that makes people not comfortable where they work. You know, I mean, I look at little things that it gets to a point, you feel like as a man, as a black man, as a member of the BIPOC community, as a woman, as somebody of a different religion as your boss and stuff, you just have to eat it. You just have to take it. That is the norm, right? And you just get comfortable over time, and your body becomes so immune to the effect of these things, and they keep happening around you. But it doesn't just feel right. Think about it. You're in a company and you just know you're capped. You know what? People like my color or people like my gender cannot make it all the way to the top. And no matter how much work you do, how much things you produce, there is always a reason why. When you look at things of like maybe black women, for instance, I can't speak for all of them, but I had 4 sisters for which I just lost one of them. They would tell you. Sometimes you will look at the black women and you're going to say, oh, the angry black woman or the angry black man. And sometimes it looks like something of a joke, but it's not. Those little acts, or identifying, I know we were talking to Jen yesterday of identifying that when you see a woman, all you want to do is to say, hey, how's your kids? How's as your husband and stuff. No, but she has a career too. Are you intentional to ask her about her career also, more than just asking about her kids? Those kind of things. You don't see a black man most time and say, "Hey, is it the CEO of a company?" There's this guy called Wes Hall who formed the Black North Initiative. He tells you. I was reading up on the story. He said a guy will come to his house in Rosedale. This is a prominent neighborhood, and they will actually come to his door and to deliver things, and they're gonna be asking him, "Where is your bus?" Or is are you the trainer for the wife in this house? Is that why you're here? These are little things. Just when I'm stopped by the cop, for instance, and they're asking me into questions, questions that are diving into areas of my life that really are not necessary for the interrogation or for the questioning in the first place. These kind of things. These are, I could go on, but trust me, anything that would just make somebody different than you to really feel different, and you want them to eat it up, that is microaggression.
Totally understandable. Geoff, I want to touch upon contracts. You had mentioned about all your subcontracts. You now have a pledge or something that you put in there, I guess, language in regards to zero tolerance on anti-Black racism or discrimination. Is that something that EllisDon worked on in order to ensure that moving forward you can dissipate and get rid of this systemic issue?
Yeah, it's two things. They're two separate things, but obviously they're complementary. And exactly, and we're happy to make that wording or the pledge available. Obviously, we want to get the pledge out there. Jen's waiting patiently for me there, but it's about education and awareness as much as because we know people want to do it, but it's it's about moving forward, raising the level, and letting everybody know, of course, that we won't tolerate it at EllisDon. So that's what that is.
And through EllisDon's leadership, I'm going to go back to the panel as a whole. You're seeing movement, I guess, in a positive direction. I'm hoping that we're seeing movement as an industry moving forward to ensure that, again, to your point, Samuel, so you can look at your daughter in the face and say that, you know what, I've been part of the solution, not the problem. I didn't let this slide. I've actually tackled this issue, and this is where we've come. We started here, and this is where we are right now. How would you advise the industry to identify and build trust with potential communities and community allies moving forward to ensure that this conversation doesn't just stop here at this webinar?
If I could go on that, I would say this. You need to go where the people are. You need to, if I want to associate with a certain group of people, let's say we want to associate with a group of young men leaders. If I am in a group where there is young women leaders, really, I cannot make the magic happen. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. So if you want to build a relationship with the communities, look for the leaders in those communities, look for the schools within those communities, look for the faith-based organizations within those communities, look for the Boys and Girls Club within those communities, get engaged with them. Let them know we are not just here to make money off just building something in your community and walk away. We want to build a relationship. What can we do? Get involved in their events. Do they have a school event? Go there and showcase some of your talents. Let them know that, let them know that the construction industry is bigger than just people putting on ads and vests. Let them know that in this industry, we have people that are accountants, people that are lawyers, people that are programmers, computer programmers, graphic designers, marketers. Go into the schools, go into the faith-based organization to let them know we're going to respect your faith within our workforce. You can come work with us. You're going to get paid like everybody else. We're not going to underpay you because of your lack of knowledge of the payment structure. Build trust by giving things even before people ask for them. That is what builds trust. You know, we have to be proactive to say, what can we do to maintain and build a relationship with people even before the people ask for it? So look at the community. When you get to a community, before you even build your foundation, take a walk around the neighborhood and see what are there. You know, are there kids in there? Do they have soccer events every year that you as a GC can sponsor? Sponsor it. You don't have to wait for them to ask for it. Get involved, do your part, and everybody else will join the game. That is it for me on that one.
Can I just weigh in on something to answer that about credibility, Giovanni? This is the last point I really want to make, but I think it's important, and I think it makes our industry uncomfortable. If you want to get support from the community, you want to get support from your employees, etc., make your company look like Canada. I know that's a Justin Trudeau phrase, but it's a terrific one. Our companies do not look like Canada. They look like a bunch of white men. And it's got to change. So this is the part that's going to make us uncomfortable. And this is what I got from Samuel. I said, Samuel, this is a couple of months ago, what is systemic racism? What is that? And he said to me, Geoff, that is a lack of access. We don't get access to the position. We don't get opportunities. Let me take you back to what the victim Marlon told me early on, because it's fundamentally important to me. He said, Geoff, you just don't get it because you don't hang around with people like me. And he said, it's okay. I married a white woman. She didn't understand anti-black racism until she married me. Now she gets it. But this is about systemic racism. We hire and we definitely promote the people we hang out with. So if we're surrounded in our companies by white men, then we promote white men. We don't do it consciously. We don't do it because we're racist. We do it because these are the people we know and we're comfortable with. We know their skills. And that's the systemic racism. So I consistently get from leaders in our industry, including yesterday, we're not racist. We would never be racist, but I still got to give the job to the person that's most qualified. Well, guess what? If black people and if women don't get that access, if there's not some level of affirmative action to give them a push, then we don't solve the problem. And that's what I'm coming to grips in my own brain with. What is systemic racism? We've got to make sure we are giving people a push. And if some white men don't get the opportunity that they might have in the existing status quo, too bad. We've got it. So make your company look like Canada and be, as Samuel said, very intentional about making that happen. And that's going to be uncomfortable. I guarantee it.
But it's, again, I think it's a perfect way to end off our webinar today. I want to firstly thank the panelists. Your involvement has been critical to this discussion, and I'm sure that this discussion will spur other discussions, and we may have you back for a follow-up, hopefully to say, look how far we've come, as opposed to we're still dealing with the problem. I still believe that as an industry, we can change, and only together. You all touched upon the topic of unity, the topic of education, the topic of conversation and understanding. And I think as a group, we still need to do that and move it forward. And don't just be satisfied with today's status quo. Push the envelope, like Samuel said. Have the difficult discussions. And we've had a number of questions come in basically on what and if EllisDon would share. Samuel, your checklist was fantastic. I think everyone is interested in receiving your 8 points over there, your diversity statements, any toolbox talks that you have. I can tell the people who are watching that EllisDon has been very gracious with not only their time, but their resources, and are willing to assist the industry moving forward. And that, for one, gives me hope. And I can't thank you enough. Any closing comments? I'm going to start with Jen again. Any closing comments just to leave off the viewers for today?
I think just to echo what you just said, that I am very hopeful. The amount of conversations that we're having, those that are offline saying, what did you mean by that? Or how can I understand that better? I mean, those are the things that really fill my cup, really, in terms of letting me know that we're on a path and we're going to get there, and we're being very intentional about it. So thank you for having us on the panel today.
It was our pleasure. Samuel, any closing comments?
Yes, Giovanni, there's a bit of a closing comment because, Geoff touched on some critical things here, and I really want to end with a bit of my hope for the industry, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
What I'm about to say is going to stem from the fact that we have approximately equal men and women in the general population. I mean, in the world, you have about maybe a slightly higher percentage of men to women, but in Canada, you have a slightly higher percentage of women to men. And there is more than 20% BIPOC population in Canada. And I differ personally from people and leaders who constantly will tell you it is very hard or challenging. There are no talents, etc. Just like Geoff has said about assets. I see what we build in construction, the crazy complexity that comes with that. I tell you this, we can make this right, and I believe there are many leaders that have the will, but there are much more that aren't making time to find the way. My hope is that in 5 years at leadership levels, just like Geoff said, companies that don't have equitable representation will be considered a minority in the industry. In 10 years and more, I hope that we're going to be seeing more BIPOC population and other visible minorities owning businesses in the industry, including our women. My intent is that when we are doing all of this, we also remain actively conscious about the intersectionalities around subjects of sexuality, faith, disabilities and abilities, and many more. So in all of this, we all have to know we have a role to play, including the BIPOC community, the women, and other underrepresented groups. I will end with this. In any role you have to play in all of this, do it well. As Martin Luther King would say, and I guess a lot of people that know me personally will know I've said this before. He said this, if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets even as Michelangelo painted, or Beethoven composed music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. You are a GC, you are an employee, you are a people leader, you are an HR person, you are a people and culture person, you are a tradesperson, you are a business owner. Do your part well in this race. Let's not be comfortable to say it's going to take long. Make the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Geoff, you
Very
invariably get
quickly,
the last word on this one.
very quickly, everyone, thank you very much for listening to us. We hope it's been helpful. I would finish by saying over racism, which requires our diligent, irresistible response, is actually the easy part. Please acknowledge, embrace the fact that, and think hard and acknowledge to your employees and associates the issues of systemic racism, what it means, because we will only fix the over racism when we fix the systemic racism. And that's the really hard part. That's what we've got to get to work on. And Jen and Samuel and me, we're happy to give anybody any help, our resources, our documents to help with all of that. So thanks to everyone. We appreciate your time and your interest.
So on behalf of the industry and the OGCA, we want to thank you all for participating in this, to our panelists and to the viewers that stuck around for the additional time that we've tagged on to this. It's an important topic, and I'm sure that this is not the end of the conversation. It's just variably in the beginning of it. And again, I would love to be able to touch back on this in 6 months, 8 months, and have a happier conversation saying, look how far we've come. And with that, I thank you all for your time, for your energies, for your opinions, and for your candor. And we'll look forward to meeting in the near future, hopefully in person. Have a happy holiday season to one and all. Be safe and be healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.